Yo, welcome to Alpha Omega University. Welcome back to all of you guys who keep coming back day after day to keep learning, keep getting better, progressing. All right. I've been working on the schedule. The schedule is gonna be out probably Wednesday. All right. If I get any more delays with it, it's gonna be on Thursday. All right. But yeah, I anticipate it to be done by Wednesday, and I will be uploading that and updating you guys on it on the Discord server. Either way, we'll by Friday, by the Friday stream, we'll definitely have the schedule up on the stream, right? So just like right now, we when it's basically starting those first 10 minutes, right? You guys see the schedule and everything, right? So that schedule is gonna be updated by the next stream. So this is the last stream that we will have with the old schedule. Only one says, let's go. Been waiting for this. It's good, man. It's good. I appreciate it. I know a lot of people have been asking questions about support style DPS, right? Ever since we kind of started breaking down the DPS sections into different types, right? Where it's not all just DPS, and it's like there's different types of DPS. A lot of people have been asking me questions about, you know, where does their role or their weapon kind of fall under, and that helps them kind of learn to play. Yo, Sarge, what's up, man? We're supposed to be getting better. That's what you're supposed to be doing the last few years, yeah. But I don't think you've been doing it too well. I mean, your name even says F tier, so I don't think you got the memo, bro. I don't think you got the memo, but it's all right. It's all right. This is for everybody else. Everybody else should be getting better, yeah. All right. So today we got episode 18. We got support DPS, right? For those of you that don't know, because you didn't watch the other episodes and things like that, I'm just gonna tell you guys real brief what it is, right? I broke down the DPS role into multiple different types of roles that each do different things, okay? So instead of just looking at all DPS roles as just DPS, I'd prefer to look at them for what they bring to the table, right? So range DPS is obviously one of them, right? And we've had conversations about those before. I mean, that's nothing new, right? That's nothing new. Everybody's already known the difference between melee and range DPS. However, the differences that I make is between range DPS, and then with melee DPS, I broke it down in two, where I broke down between the bruiser style, right? The damage over time melee DPS, and then there's the burst melee DPS. Okay, we've had episodes on all three of those already. They're episodes 17, 16, and 15. So if you haven't looked them up and you're interested, go ahead and look at those. I know last episode a lot of people were really engaged in it because it was the burst DPS, and that, you know, that's what everybody's kind of doing right now. So it's good. Now support DPS is the next section I added to the DPS section, right? To the DPS row, I should say. It's the next section to the DPS row. Support DPS is any DPS that is not a pure cut DPS. So that means that they don't do a ton of damage as their primary purpose of existing in the field. Okay, they bring something else to the table, and that something else is some sort of utility, right? So let's think about like permafrost, right? Permafrost, the damage of the permafrost is lower than, say, like a siege bow, right? It's lower than a demon fang. Okay, so then why should you play permafrost if the damage is lower than some other weapons? Well, that's because it's not a pure DPS. It's not a traditional DPS. It's a support DPS. Okay, that's the argument I'm making, is that there's support DPS. By that I mean that it brings a utility to the table where the permafrost actually helps the clump stay clumped for an extra second, or what is it, second and a half, something like that. So it helps the clump stay clumped with its own E. So its E is actually a good strong stun that actually enables the rest of your Zerg to hit that clump. Okay, whereas if you have like a Demon Fang, right? Your Demon Fang is gonna hit and it's gonna be great. It's gonna do a lot of damage. That's awesome, but it's not gonna do literally anything else for the entire Zerg. It's literally just gonna put out damage and that's it. Whereas something like a Permafrost is gonna hit the damage that it hits, and although it is lower, it's going to bring something else to the table, which is that stun, okay? And that stun enables others to do their damage. Now, if we look at other weapons like Damnation or Spirit Hunter, right? Like the pierces, carving, right? So those pierce weapons, I mean, their damage is not high, okay? Their damage is not high. So then why do you bring them to the table? Well, you bring them to the table because they bring some level of support, right? And I know a lot of times people will say, oh no, you know, these weapons are they're just support players. They're just support players. And I don't want to say that. I personally don't put them in the same bucket as support players. And the reason for it is because Damnation does much more damage than a support such as like a fucking Locust, right? Locust does literally no damage, okay? So when you look at it, yes, they're supports, but they are a DPS style of support wherein they still make DPS, right? They still put out that damage, okay? Spirit Hunter, same thing. I mean, the damage of Spirit Hunter is actually pretty high, right? And it brings that pierce, so that's another level. So that's what I talk about, support DPS, okay? We're gonna be talking about a bunch of different weapons right now, going through this. And for those of you that don't know, the way we're doing this series, right? We're almost done with this series. We have support DPS today. On Friday, we have the healer episode, all right? And then Saturday, we're going to be having the supports episode, okay? Now, aside from those, then we're going to get into the new schedule, all right? And the new schedule is going to basically be a whole different thing. We're not going to do a series for a couple weeks with a new episode. We're going to kind of just go over individual important things, such as like the flow of ZvZ, like the back and forth, how to understand timing, right? That's one of them, right? Another one is going to be the terrain. So using your terrain to advantage and how to use the terrain to kind of protect yourself from the enemy, but or at the same time, use the terrain to kind of screw over the enemy by putting them in a corner, things like that, all right? So those are some of the things we're going to be looking at. So we're going to be going through a bunch of those kind of highly technical tactics and strategies that we can use in the game, okay, in the back and forth of the ZvZs. That's what we're going to be focusing on after this series. So this week, after Saturday, we're going to be done with this series, and we're going to go on to those individual episodes. After a couple weeks, we're going to go on to another series, and you know, I talked about it before, so I don't want to go too much into it now, but essentially that's when we're going to get into another series. But for this series, the way we're doing it is half of the episode, the first half of the episode or so, sometimes we take a little longer, but it's okay. The first half of the episode is essentially talking about what weapons fall under the category. Okay, so for today would be the category of support DPS. And I already mentioned some like Damnation, Spirit Hunter, Permafrost, right? But there's more. So we're going to talk about those weapons. We're going to talk about the Q, the W, and the E, obviously, right? And what they bring to the table, what you should be using and how you should be using them, all right? Then we're going to talk about the armors that you can use with these kinds of these weapons. And at the end, we're going to talk about, at the end of the first half, I should say, we're going to be talking about the tips, right? So like, I'll give you guys some playstyle tips of how you should play these weapons, the way you should kind of act, and what is your actual goal, right? Because if you tell somebody like, hey, you're a DPS, you need to make damage. And it's like, that's totally wrong, because technically a fucking, let me see, one of these weapons, technically, I mean, a Spirit Hunter is technically a damage weapon, right? It's technically DPS, okay? So if you tell a Spirit Hunter, like, oh, your job is to make damage, it's like, okay, well, they're going to make damage, but making damage does not equate the same with the Spirit Hunter's main job, which is to get that pierce out, right? So if you get that pierce out late, for example, then I don't care how much damage you put out as a Spirit Hunter. If you dropped your pierce late, then you kind of were useless, right? Because you need to come in first. And that's one of the tips. We'll talk about it more later. But essentially, we're going to look at those tips one by one. That way you guys can find things that you guys can kind of work on individually, day by day, and get better at these weapons. At the end, so like the second half or like the last third of the episode or so, we're going to be looking at some videos. Now, I don't have too many videos for this for the support DPS, but the videos that we do have are actually really good videos. Okay, most of them have comms and they're very good for like you know, showing you guys the things that I want you guys to try to accomplish on a day-to-day on a ZvZ by ZvZ. All right, so as always, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, drop them in the chat. I am looking at the chat. If it has something to do with what we're talking about right now, go for it. If not, it's okay. You can still drop it in the chat. I'll still answer. The whole point of making this a stream and not just videos is so that we can have back and forth conversations. That way I can make sure that you guys are kind of learning and retaining the knowledge, right? Otherwise it's just kind of, you know, you're listening to it, but you're not going to actually get anything from it. And that's pointless for you and me, right? So if you got questions, definitely drop them in the chat. I am looking. So yeah, let me see. I think, do I have any more announcements? I don't think so. Let me drink some water before I end up getting fucking dehydrated and shit again. All right, give me a second. All right, there we go. Yo, Safiana, appreciate you. All right, so let's get on with it. So the weapons, I'm gonna tell you guys straight up right now, just real quick. I'm gonna give you the rundown of the weapons, and then I'm gonna go one by one. So the weapons are Damnation, Spirit Hunter, Permafrost, Dawnsong, Bow of Baden, and Carving. All right. Now, if you feel as though there should be a weapon in here that is like a support DPS that I did not include in this list of 6, okay, that's all right. Listen, I'm not perfect, right? I'm not perfect. Okay, there are some weapons that I think could be in here, right? Like Realmbreaker fits this description, but the thing is that I put Realmbreaker as a burst DPS as opposed to support because I feel like it does. If you play appropriately, it can do a little extra damage to the point where it kind of puts it in that realm of actual DPS, right? In my perspective. But I know a lot of people are like, no, it doesn't do enough damage. That shit's like just support. It's not even support DPS. I mean, that's, you know, it's up to you. Everybody's different. Yo, welcome, Safiana. Welcome. I appreciate you. All right, so yeah, so those are the main weapons that most people use. There are other weapons like the what's it called? It's like the spear, the Avalonian. No, not the Avalonian spear. Well, I mean, actually, yeah, the Trinity spear, right? Technically, that would be support DPS, but it's not used and it's not very viable, right? So I'm not gonna really talk about it. What's the other one? There's a Daybreaker. I think it's called Daybreaker. The one that pierces, or not pierces. Sorry, the one that purges. The one that purges. That one. I mean, you know, Daybreaker is it's too weak to be anything DPS useful, and beyond it being weak, the utility, right? The utility, that's what we're talking about. The utility that it brings to the table, it's just not strong enough. Like it doesn't make me be like, yeah, oh my god, we need that pierce, or we need that purge. It's like, no, you really don't, right? You can get purge for so many other things at this point. Like you don't need the purge from the Daybreaker. If it was like a purge and like I don't know, like a silence or something, I don't know, like adding something else to that purge, then I would say, okay, Daybreaker is something we can look at, right? But until then, I don't think so. Dex is asking Avalonian fire weapon, the Dawnsong. Yeah, I mentioned the Dawnsong. If I didn't mention it, it's definitely on the list. You're right. Dawnsong, for sure. Dawnbreaker, is that what it's called? I thought it was Daybreaker. Dawnbreaker? I think you're thinking Dawnsong and Daybreaker. I think you're combining them, Inspector. Because there's Dawnsong, and that's the fire one. That's the one Dex is talking about. And Daybreaker, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about with Daybreaker, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not the name of it. It's the one, it's I think it's a sword, actually. I think it's a sword. It's the one that just like slashes through the enemy, and then it purges everybody in on the way. Right? Nobody fucking uses that weapon. It's a spear. Yeah, I think it's a spear. That's what I said initially, but maybe I don't know. I don't have the game in front of me right now. Daybreaker? Okay, all right. Yeah, you got all right, cool. But yeah, so like the Daybreaker, right? Like if they add something to that utility, then I would say, yeah, I mean, like it can definitely be a strong weapon. I can 100% see the Daybreaker being a really strong weapon, exactly as it is, except if they added something else to it, like I don't know, root everybody or fucking silence them or I don't know, do something else than purge them. Like maybe even like if they added like a purge and then it keeps them from actually getting any new buffs for 3 seconds, right? So like actually like purge them and then keep them from getting new buffs for 3 seconds, right? So it's kind of like what the life curse, right? The life curse, it purges over and over and over and over, right? But instead of doing a purge over and over, rather than just it's a single purge, with the Daybreaker, and then it literally makes them immune to buffs for like 3 seconds. If that, just that one change for Daybreaker, and now suddenly I promise you it would be fucking meta, absolutely meta, right? But it's just too far down right now where it doesn't have enough utility, and that's why it's not used, and that's why we don't talk about it in this list, right? Purge and Root would be nasty. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, that's all I'm saying. It's like you add something else to that Purge, and suddenly Daybreaker will definitely make this list, right? But for now, it's just Damnation, Spirit Hunter, Permafrost, Dawnsong, Baden, and Carving. And I know Baden is one of those that you guys are like, Baden, what the hell? Listen, Bo Baden is strong. We'll talk about it in a second. Let's get down the list first. So, starting off with Damnation. So, the Damnation is strong because it has a really strong kit, all right? The E itself is huge, right? Like, it's like 13 meters, 14 meters, some shit like that. I think it's 13 meters. 13 meter AoE. So, like, it's your entire fucking screen, basically, okay? It's like your entire fucking screen. You cannot miss with the Damnation, okay? So, that AoE Pierce is huge. Now, the only thing that a lot of people don't like about the Damnation is that the Pierce itself is not too strong, okay? It's like in the 60s range, I want to say, for the Pierce, for the armor Pierce. And that's not amazing. It really isn't. It's not amazing, especially when like things like Carving is like up in the 80s or 90s, and Spirit Hunter's up in the 70s or I think 80s if you get enough spec in it. So yeah, Damnation being between 50, 60 in the Pierce, it is low. However, the AoE is so freaking big that you're gonna pierce everybody everywhere all the time, which means what? What does Damnation bring to the table that, say, Spirit Hunter doesn't, right? Spirit Hunter has a better pierce, it has a stronger pierce, but Damnation is a bigger pierce, right? It's lower pierce, but it's bigger, which means what? Damnation is going to be more reliable, okay? Now, you can say, oh, well, it's not reliable because you can interrupt it. That is true. That is true. And that's another deficit of the Damnation, right? That Damnation, not only can you interrupt it because it has a cast time, versus Spirit Hunter, you can just throw that shit, right? That is one big important thing. But here's another factor that really plays into it. Damnation requires the use of Scholar Robe. Now, Scholar Robe forces the player to not have a defensive on the chest piece, and that's huge because they're already running Cloth, right? By running a ranged weapon, you're usually going to run Cloth. So you're already running Cloth, and now you're forced to run Scholar Robe. That's tough because now you don't have the ability to use, say, like a Cleric Robe for a defensive, or even more damage with a Cleric Robe, right? So now you take that away because you're required to have that cast time reduction, okay? So Damnation is very, very strong because of how big that AoE is. It's also very reliable because of how big that AoE is. However, it is not the most optimal Pierce because it's literally the lowest E Pierce in the game, okay? Well, I mean, there might be other things that have like a very small Pierce that I can't think of, but like as a true Pierce weapon, right? It's the lowest one, okay? However, the Damnation W picks up on that a little bit because the Damnation W, you can run the armor pierce on the W, and actually when you add up the W from the Damnation pierce and the E, okay, when you add up those two pierces, suddenly that's over 100 pierce, and that is the strongest pierce in the game, okay? Because Carving cannot make it higher, and Spirit Hunter can't make it higher either, right? The strongest pierce in the game from one player only, okay, is Damnation hitting his E and then hitting his W. The problem with it is that, you know, usually you're gonna hit your E and then the clump gets hit and then you hit your W, right? Because there's a little bit of stand time and all that stuff. So working it out, getting it done is actually really hard, okay? Getting it like to actually work out that way where you hit your E and then the W, it's pretty fucking hard. However, I'm saying if you can accomplish that, then you actually have a very, 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 very powerful and reliable pierce, okay? So Damnation is very strong because of those things. Now, when we look at the damage that the Damnation does, because we're talking about support DPS, not just support, right? So we were talked about the support piece of it, the Pierce. Now let's talk about the DPS portion. When we look at the DPS portion for Damnation, the Q, which is the fucking the dots, right? The damage over time, I forget, the curse stacks. The curse stacks, whatever. Let's call them that. I forget what they're actually called. So the curse stacks, right? You can even throw the sickle, or you can throw that curse tar, or whatever the hell it's called, the new Q. All right, those two are fine. Those two are good. Okay, here's the thing. Those stacks, they may not seem like they do a lot of damage, but I promise you, over time, if your Damnation player is constantly putting it on people, on enemies, it will actually take a lot of damage over time. Like a person can't just stand in it. I was actually fighting a ZvZ like 2-3 days ago, and the enemy had a Damnation who was throwing that tar, right? That AoE tar thing, whatever. That if you stand on it, you get stacks. And we were sieging a territory, and this guy just kept throwing them there on the territory. And so I because I was a tank, I was at the front, I kept stepping on it. Okay. I can't tell you, man, how much damage I was fucking taking just from that fucking Q. Literally just the Q, man. Like, I had a healer constantly have to come up to heal me just because I kept stepping in that damn fucking tar, right? But I had to, because I had to be up there because I was a tank. And so what I'm saying is, now I was taking enough damage where my healers were actually having to get out of the position that they were in and come closer to heal me. They weren't being able to focus on other things. They had to constantly remember that they had to drop a Q or something on me every 10 or 15 seconds at most, literally at most, right? So what I'm saying is that Q actually does a decent amount of overtime damage over time. That's very, very important. The W itself, the Pierce, the W Pierce, the armor Pierce, it's actually the damage it does is actually decent. Now, for a W, it's actually decent damage. Okay, I'm not saying it's massive damage. I mean, it's a fucking W. What do you expect? But for being a W, the damage that the armor pierce does is good. Not only that, the range is actually really, really, really long as well. So it makes it very strong, right? So the E itself does minimal damage. Honestly, like, people think that they can make it do a lot of damage, but like, honestly, like, you're gonna have to do a lot to make that E from the Damnation actually do a lot of damage. Okay, so don't even do it. Don't waste your time with any of that. Just the E damage is low. Just know that it's just low. It is what it is, and there's not a lot you can do to change it. Okay, but the Q and the W make it strong. This is why I said the Damnation has a good kit, right? It's not necessarily the Damnation as a whole is very strong. It's just that when you put each individual thing where it, kind of in context, right? If you're kind of sieging a castle or sieging a territory, things like that, Damnation tends to do very, very, very well, right? Especially because that E is so big. Sometimes you can even use it open world properly because the E is so big. However, in open world, it's not as strong because the W Pierce, although it's very long, it's not very wide. Right? So in open world, usually people will spread out, as much as possible. And so it'll be harder to hit that W appropriately. Dex says, a lot of people stop using Damnation because it's slow. It is slow. It is slow. Absolutely, it's slow. You even need Scholar Room to try to make it faster. And even then, it's still slow. I agree it's slow. But here's the thing. People didn't stop using Damnation because it's slow. That's not the reason people stopped using Damnation. Damnation has always been slow, and yet it's always been used. Okay, the reason Damnation went away is because the meta turned into a melee meta. If you're a melee meta, if your entire Zerg is melee, and you flood into the enemy, you're inside the enemy, guess who the hell is gonna die first? It's gonna be your Clothies, and if your Clothies are like Damnation, then you suddenly lose your fucking peers. Right? It doesn't work with the current meta. That's why people stopped using it. Not because it's slow. I know people say, oh, we stopped using Damnation because it's slow. It's not good. It's not strong. It's not whatever. It's all lies. They just don't understand how the meta shifted. That's all it is. They don't understand how the meta shifted. Right? But the reason Damnation is not being played is simply because it doesn't fit with the meta. When the meta switches back to ranged, suddenly people will stop playing shit like Carving, and you'll see less Spirit Hunters on the field. You'll see a lot more Damnations on the field, right? That's just the way it is. This is why I tell you guys, Don't go off of the meta. Understand why these changes have happened, right? And then that way it gives you the ability to understand when to bring it back. Because if your Zerg starts to play ranged, then you should start looking into switching into Damnation again, okay? Because Damnation is strong, but you are right, in general, it is slow. In general, yeah, it is slow. It's slower than Spirit Hunter for sure, right? So that's the next one we're gonna talk about. It's gonna be Spirit Hunter. So the Spirit Hunter, the Q is okay. I mean, you're not really gonna do too much damage with it because it's pretty small, it's pretty thin, okay? It is kind of like 8 or 9 meters front. So it's not bad, but it's not super wide, and you're not going to be using it as a big major damage push. Okay, it's just not. It's more to just get stacks, I guess. However, the W from the Spirit Hunter, that one's pretty fucking killer. Okay, the W from the Spirit Hunter is Forest of Spears. You're usually going to run Forest of Spears. Why? Because Forest of Spears does a shitload of damage. Also, it's very quick, right? The damage that it puts out is very fast. So what you want to do with the Spirit Hunter, you come in, you drop your E, which also the E is instant, right? So you just drop that shit, and it's very quick, and it pierces, and then you drop your W on top of all the pierced people. It's all very, very fast, and then you get the fuck out, right? So Spirit Hunter is strong because of how quick it is. Now, we were just talking about how Damnation is slow, right? But it's very reliable. Spirit Hunter is very fast, and it has high damage. It does have high damage. However, the E itself is not huge, okay? It's not huge. Like, forward to back, I think it's like 9 meters, something like that, maybe 10? Maybe 10 meters? I'm not quite sure, but forward to back is fine. Like, the distance forward is okay. It's long enough. But the width of that actual pierce of the E of the Spirit Hunter is not wide enough. It just isn't wide enough to encompass a lot, right? The moment that you pierce all those people, you have to pierce them exactly on time with the guy clumping the enemy. Because if you are literally a second late, you're not going to pierce that many people. And we'll see a little bit in the videos. I'm sure it's going to be in it. If it's not, then I guess the video I picked out is just a really good fucking Spirit Hunter player. But in general, with Spirit Hunter, you have to be very, very, very good, okay? To be able to hit that clump extremely fast right after that clump. Otherwise, right after the clump happens, right after the air compress or whatever it is. Otherwise, you're only gonna pierce like half the people, okay? Because the width is not that big. This also goes for carving, and we'll talk about carving in a second. But this also goes for carving, so keep it in mind. Now the E itself for the Spirit Hunter, the damage that it does is actually decent. It's not super low. It really isn't. It's decent. It's not great. No, I'm not saying it's great, but it's decent. Okay, it's a decent amount of damage. And then when you add the W, which is high damage, suddenly the Spirit Hunter actually has a very, very big punch. This is why Spirit Hunter, for a long time, was the weapon of choice for Pierce players, right? Nowadays, it's starting to be a little bit more into the carving and things like that, right? People are switching a little bit more into carving because carving is a stronger Pierce. But Spirit Hunter has a much higher DPS output. Okay, so it kind of comes down to what do you want? You want higher DPS output, or you want a higher Pierce? Okay, so it's kind of like the back and forth is what are you gonna decide? And right now it seems to be that people are playing both carving and Spirit Hunter, about even, if not maybe I think some Zergs are running a little bit more carving, some Zergs are running a little bit more Spirit Hunter, but essentially it's about half and half overall. The next weapon is carving, since we already talked about it a little bit now. The next weapon is carving. Now carving, the Q, we've talked about the swords Q. It's as good a Q as you're gonna get for getting melee stacks. All right, you can't really ask for much more than what it is. It's an AOE around you. It's like 5.5 meters or whatever around you. It's gonna get stacks pretty simply, unless you're playing super far back and you're always scared. The W is also going to help with getting the stacks. And it's very important to get the stacks for carving, because carving Pierce goes off of the stacks, right? So if you have all 3 stacks, you're going to have a really strong Pierce. Now, the carving is the strongest Pierce in the game when it's a single skill, all right? As a single skill, it is the strongest pierce in the game, the E. If you use it with 3 stacks, it's like almost 90 fucking pierce. It's huge, okay? It's a lot of pierce. So the carving has the strongest pierce, and that's why a lot of people are switching into carving. Also, the problem with carving is that the damage is very low, okay? So the carving is one of the only weapons that I'm going to include here in the support DPS that barely puts out enough damage for me to include it in here. But it's honestly, it's like if you were to tell me, no, carving is like a pure cut support weapon, then I honestly, I wouldn't argue with you too much. I really wouldn't. I just know that you can play carving as a little bit more DPS if you run like a Hallion jacket with it, or even like a stalker jacket, and you play it like a brawler, like a bruiser type. It can do enough damage, but it's hard. It's very, very hard, okay, to do that. So carving is strong because of the pierce, and that's primary. It's main thing, right? It's just the pierce. The damage is pretty mediocre. It really is. So if you're trying really hard to get a lot of good damage out of carving, you're kind of wasting your efforts, honestly. You really are. It's really hard. It's really hard. But again, the pierce is very strong. The problem that I have with carving, the carving pierce is that the carving pierce is so reliant on its stacks that you need to have those stacks, and you need to be in position to be able to hit that E quickly, right? Where you need to actually be in range of the clump at all times so that you can use that E to slash through the enemy. So it's similar to Spirit Hunter because of the range and the width of the pierce itself, okay, on the E. So it's similar to that, but remember, the Spirit Hunter actually brings a lot of damage to the table. What does carving bring? Well, you can say, well, carving is gonna let you have Iron Will, so Iron Will is gonna make you unpurgeable for the stacks. It's like, I don't care because the Spirit Hunter E, you don't really need all those stacks to be able to make it worth, right? And so being purgeable or not purgeable is not that big of a bonus, okay? That's why a lot of people that run carving, they run it as a plate, okay, and they end up running it as a support. And this is why I said I don't mind you putting it as a pure support or support DPS. So, but because it is primarily used for pierce, that's why I put it in here. The next weapon we're going to talk about is the Permafrost, right? We talked about a Permafrost a little bit already. The Permafrost, the Q, I know a lot of people run the, I forget what it's called, Ice Shard. I think it's called Ice Shard. Okay, the Ice Shard is the Q that drops down a fucking Ice Shard, I guess, and it hits people in like a 3-meter radius, whatever. People love running the Permafrost like that, with like a Scholar Robe so that they can, they can drop those Qs quick and they can do a lot of damage and stuff. I think those people are all wrong, okay? I think the best way to run Permafrost is to understand your role, right? You are support DPS, and you're trying really, really, really hard to make yourself as a Permafrost do a lot more damage than your weapon is supposed to do, all right? This is why you go and sacrifice things like having a Cleric Robe, which gives you a defensive. You sacrifice that shit for a Scholar Robe so that you can drop a bunch of Qs faster, okay? I don't agree with that at all. Here's what I think. I think Permafrost should be running the Frozen Surge Q, which is the new Q that slows 20% and does a little bit of damage, right? That Q is actually pretty strong, okay? For the damage that it does, it's actually decent. It's not like it's not mediocre damage, okay? It's decent damage for a Q, right? Now, the W, what I would say is it depends on how you want to play. If you want to play more back line, like you want to kind of stay in the back, like if your Zerg is primarily ranged and you're usually going to stay in the back, then, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, nah, you're crazy. But listen, Slow Beam is actually really strong, right? The damage it does if you run it with Cloth is actually going to be decent. I'm not going to say it's strong, but it's decent. The reason I said it's strong, the Slow Beam is strong, is not because of the damage, it's because of the amount of slow it gives people, okay? But that's obviously a very, very niche usage of that of that W. What you should run with the W with permafrost is the blink. I mean, that frost blink is really, really, really strong. In my opinion, it's one of the best W's in the game. Okay, so you can never go wrong with that frost blink. You will never go wrong with it, right? It helps you get in position or get out of danger, right? So it's amazing. Also, it's a root, so if there's enemies coming in inside of you or trying to kill you or whatever, you can just blink away, and it also roots them. So that W is very, very strong. But I'm just saying, don't be afraid to look at the slow beam, okay, and see how it might fit in your Zerg if your Zerg is running a full range comp, which is not very common right now, but you know, it's possible. All right. Now, the E itself for the permafrost, the damage that it does is good. It's actually pretty good. Okay, it's pretty strong. It's not massive, but it's pretty strong. The stun it does, honestly, in my opinion, it's a little OP. Okay, it's not OP only because it's not like full-blown OP, only because the stun doesn't last a very long time. However, the E damage plus the stun, as long as it is, it's very, very, very strong E. So if you run permafrost with like a cleric row, so you have the defensive, right? And then you run it with the frozen surge Q, which is gonna slow enemies. It's gonna do a decent amount of damage, and it's gonna slow people down 20%. It might not seem like a lot, but it adds up, especially when it's a fucking Q. And in the W, you can run the blink, right? And then the E for the stun and the damage. The permafrost becomes a high utility DPS weapon. Okay, it's very, very high utility because you have a root in your W, you have a stun in the E, and then you have a slow in the Q, right? So you think about it, you got slow, root, and stun, right? That's what you got in all three of those. Actually, I think the blink is considered a stun, right? I think they changed it a while back, and I think it's considered a stun. Anyway, you got two stuns and a fucking slow, right? It's very high utility, and every single one of those actually does a decent amount of damage. Trying to change it and being like, oh no, I'm gonna run it with Scholar Robe, right? I'm gonna run it with Scholar Robe so I can do more damage and do all these things. You're destroying the purpose of the permafrost. Okay, if you want to do more damage, run a different weapon. Run a true damage weapon, like a fucking Siege Bowl, a Demon Fang, a Brimstone. I don't know, all the other burst weapons that we talked about, right? If you want to do more damage, run those. But if you're going to run permafrost, run it as a utility DPS. And I promise you, the amount of utility you're going to bring to the table, if you play it well, is going to be significant. Okay. The next one is going to be Dawnsong. Now, Dawnsong is a weapon that a lot of people go back and forth in. For some time, people have been like, Dawnsong is incredibly strong. Everybody needs to run it. And then like a few weeks later, everybody's like, yeah, Dawnsong is garbage. Nobody ever touched that again, right? And a couple weeks later, people are like, Dawnsong, guys, everybody should be on board. Dawnsong is so back and forth with people. People don't know whether it's good or not. The truth is that Dawnsong is very, very powerful. But it has a little to do with the E and more to do with the Q and W. Similar to when I told you guys when we were I think it was like episode 15, I think it was, when we were talking about range DPS, okay? We were talking about the Brimstone, and I told you guys that the single target Q from the fire and the firewall on the W are extremely powerful, okay? Those are extremely, extremely powerful. The single target Q does a shitload of damage. It's literally the highest damage output Q in the game, okay? And the W, the firewall, is massive utility, especially against melee Zergs, which is the majority of the game right now. All right. So the Q and the W make the Dawnsong very, very attractive as a weapon. Now, when we look at the E, it has to be useful, right? The E itself, the cast time is low enough where you don't have to run a Scholar Robe with it. So it's pretty quick. The range of it is actually fucking huge. And the width of it is also huge. Right? So the entire AoE of the Dawnsong is really, really big. The damage that it does is comparable to the damage of the permafrost, except just maybe a little tick off on it. Okay? It's a little less, I think, than the permafrost. The permafrost E. I'm not talking about anything else, just the E. All right. So the Donsong E damage is still decent. It's not bad. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm not saying it's bad. Okay, it's decent. And what it does is that it reduces heals. I think it was like what 35%, something like that. So it reduces heals within that area where the Donsong hits. So because of all these things, Donsong is actually really strong. If an enemy is not able to heal up a clump appropriately, then guess what's gonna happen? They cannot push you. Because their Zerg is low on HP, they won't want to take the risk of pushing you, right? And if you keep taking away their heals, then what's gonna happen over time is that you're not going to allow the enemy to top off, and therefore you're not gonna allow them to kind of take the initiative from you. So what's going to happen is that the enemy is constantly going to have to keep backing up and keep taking damage from you, because they cannot commit to you because their healers can't catch up on heals. This is why heal reduction in this game is extremely powerful, but nobody ever thinks it is, because it's one of those things that is very hard to see how it plays out. But I promise you, if you have Donsong, at least one Donsong in your Zerg, you're gonna see a major difference in the heals that the enemy is able to put out if that Donsong plays appropriately. Now, the E is strong and all of those things are good. The utility of the E, right? But you also have high utility in the W with the firewall, and you have high damage from the Q with a single target Q, right? So the Donsong is actually a very well-rounded weapon for a support style DPS. Okay, so a lot of people go back and forth with it, but that's because they're trying to make it damage. Just like what was it, like a month and a half ago, I saw some guys, I think it was Sex and Flex. They went and they were basically trying to run a, no, you know what, it wasn't Sex and Flex. I don't know. It was some Zerg. It was some Zerg. They were trying to run a Donsong bomb squad, right? And yeah, they were getting kills and everything. It was fine. Here's the thing though, it didn't work. They switched out of it. Why? Because it's not meant to be a high damage output weapon. It's just not. Right? And so this is the problem that I'm saying. This is the issue. Everybody keeps trying to make every single one of these weapons into true DPS weapons. They are not true DPS weapons. They are support type weapons, just like we see with the permafrost and people running the ice shard with scholar robe and all that, sacrificing so much to try to make it a true DPS weapon. It's like, it's not. You just need to be okay with the fact that it's not a true DPS weapon. It's a support DPS. And as a support DPS, Permafrost and Donsong are very powerful. All right. So now we're going to go into the last weapon that I included in this list, and that's the Bow of Baden. And I know a lot of you guys are like, all right, Bow of Baden, what the fuck? Like, what are you saying? All right. So listen, Bow of Baden is very strong. However, it doesn't fit the current meta. Okay. Similar to what I was saying about Damnation, where it is strong, but it doesn't fit the meta. All right. Bow of Baden in a different meta would actually be very strong. Here's the problem. When the meta was ranged and it was filled with brimstones and siege bows, all right, when that meta was around, people still didn't play Bow of Baden because they still didn't like it. But that's not because Bow of Baden was not actually going to be good. It's because people didn't believe in that weapon. Just like people didn't believe in siege bow just 2-3 months ago, right? Just like people didn't believe in Enigmatic years ago, just like people didn't believe in Locust years ago, right? People didn't believe in Baden, and that's why it wasn't used. I'm saying that it actually has always had a good place in a Zerg. I'm not saying run a Baden in every party. I'm saying run at least one, maybe two Badens in your entire Zerg. If you have like a 60-man or bigger Zerg, right? Run one or two Badens in your entire Zerg. And if those people know what they're doing, I promise you they're gonna become very powerful if you're fighting against a ranged enemy. Why is it against a ranged enemy? Well, because the utility that the Baden brings is in the interrupt, right? Now, that interrupt stays there a decent amount of time. And when people go and say, oh, well, why are you gonna run a Baden when you can just run an Eagle, right? Well, the reason is because they do different roles, right? The Bow of Baden interrupts, and sure, the Eagle interrupts with the E, but everything else is different. The Both Baden is more of a DPS, whereas the Eagle is more of a support, right? The Eagle is going to have that wind wall that basically purges, and it's a wind wall, right? It also has the cooldown reduction Q, which is very strong. I like the Eagle a lot. But what does the Baden have? Now the Q pierce for the bows in general is okay. It's not huge. I don't really care for it. But explosive arrows on the W, explosive arrows is very, very strong. Just look at longbows and how much success longbows have had because they used explosive arrows, right? Both Baden can use explosive arrows as well. Now with the E, it's gonna go and actually interrupt people and do damage over a longer period of time. Now, you're not expecting the clump to stay clumped for a long time. No, of course not. You're not trying to put out a bunch of damage. But you know what's gonna happen is when that fucking E hits somewhere and starts interrupting all the casts there, you know what everybody else is gonna do? They're gonna walk away from that area. And I've mentioned this before. There are weapons that are specifically designed as area denial weapons. You understand? It's area denial weapons. So a Both Baden is an area denial weapon because nobody wants to stand in a fucking lightning storm with interrupt, right? Nobody wants to stand in that shit. So therefore, the Baden is strong because it's an area denial weapon. You put that shit on a choke, right? Or the enemy's trying to push you and you get a good angle and you can hit it on them as they're pushing at you. They're gonna walk themselves into that interrupt, right? Those kinds of things are where the Baden is gonna be strong. The problem is that a lot of people don't know how to use the Baden. They say, oh, well, it's really hard to hit it where you want to hit because it's basically, it shoots an arrow and the first person that gets hit by that arrow is where it triggers, right? And I understand that. I understand it 100%. However, when the enemy is walking towards you, the Both Baden becomes very strong. If you're playing on chokes or if you're playing on territories or castles where you can shoot over walls and shit like that, right? The Both Baden can be very strong, right? So again, look at weapons for their features. Don't look at weapons on whether or not people have used them before or not. There was a time a long time ago that Baden was actually very, very powerful to the point that they had to nerf it because it was that powerful, right? Now, after they nerfed it, everybody got this idea that Baden now just is unusable. It's not. It's still strong. It's just not as strong as it was before. And it has a specific role, a niche role, right? So you don't want to have too many of them in your Zerg, but it's something that if you kind of feel like trying something out, maybe you think it might help. A good player with a Both Baden will do a lot of work on the enemy. Let me catch up on the chat here. Dex says there's one glove that makes 20% heal reduction and supposed can stack 3 times. Adept's Hellfire Gauntlet. Isn't that the one that throws like a flaming ball? If it's the one that throws a flaming ball, yeah, no, the problem with that one is that it's very unreliable. The ball, like the way it bounces is so slow and it's just so unreliable. Like for ZvZ, it's just not reliable. I would assume that it's good against enemies that are trying to run away from you in like Corrupted Dungeon or something like that. But outside of something like that, it's not going to be very strong, unfortunately. But yes, I do like the heal reduction. I do like that. It's just I don't think it's gonna be worth it. 20% for very unlikely to hit it at least twice. So all right, let's move on. Now we're gonna look at the armors, right? So the armors for these weapons, we're gonna have the Scholar Robe. We already talked about that a little bit. The Scholar Robe is gonna be mainly used for damnation because you got to reduce the cast times. All right, you don't want to use it for permafrost. I know a lot of people do because they think that's the great way to do it. Don't do it. You're sacrificing too much. Don't do it. Instead, look into your role, follow your role, and don't try to do too much. Focus on your role. So Scholar Robe only for damnation, and that's because it needs it. But either way, damnation is still strong because the W pierce and the E is going to be able to give you a really, really strong pierce on the enemy if you're able to hit it on time. Right? The Cleric Robe is going to be obviously another option here because the Cleric Robe is going to give you high damage output, but it's also a big defensive, right? So things like Spirit Hunter can use the Cleric Robe very well. because the Spirit Hunter, like I said earlier, it's very fast, right? It drops its E quickly, it drops its W quickly, and so you're able to come in and out quickly, so you don't have to have like a leather jacket to keep you inside of the enemy. All right, you can run Spirit Hunter with some leather jacket like Hellion jacket or Stalker jacket. I know a lot of people do run it that way, especially nowadays when the majority of the Zerg is melee, so you're gonna be like inside the enemy for a long period of time. If you're going to be playing like that, then definitely run Hellion Jacket, right? I am full for it. But what I'm saying is that you don't have to. You can actually run the Cleric Robe just fine with the Spirit Hunter, and it will work. The Cleric Robe will also work really well for the Permafrost. Dawn Song, both Baden would work as well. The Hellion Jacket, you might want to use that for carving. If you want to run it with a leather, you don't really want to run cloth with carving, because carving is slow. The reason it's slow is because you're gonna have to stay there stacking for a while, and then when the E actually hits, most of the time you're gonna slash in towards the enemy as opposed to slash out of the enemy. And so when that's gonna happen is it's gonna always place you inside the enemy. So because you're constantly going to be inside the enemy, or at least close to the enemy with carving, you're gonna want that Hellion Jacket for survivability. Otherwise, just run plate with the carving and play it as a full-blown support. So for the helmets and boots, we have Night Helmet. Obviously, Night Helmet's always good. It helps with making sure that your cast goes through, so things like Damnation. But Face Scale Hat is optimal, right? Face Scale Hat, in my opinion, is better than Night Helm. Although Night Helm kind of serves, the idea so that you don't get knocked back, right? And that's a separate thing now. But when it comes to like making sure your cast goes through, Face Scale is number one, absolutely number one. You gotta go Face Scale Hat, especially with Damnation. The rest of these don't really need it, don't really need Face Scale Hat, so you can run Night Helmet with any of these, literally any of it, like Spirit Hunter, Permafrost, Dawn Song, Baden, or Carving. You can run Night Helm. You don't necessarily need it, but it helps to have Night Helms in a Zerg. I mean, it's what I'm saying. In general, you can run whatever the hell you want. You can also run a cleanse helmet, the leather helmet. You can just run cleanse on the helmet. If you get stunned, especially if you're playing something like carving, you don't want to be stunned inside the enemy. So having a personal cleanse would be pretty useful. Spirit Hunter, same thing, because Spirit Hunter does have to get in there a little bit, a little close up. And even though Spirit Hunter is very fast, you don't want to stay there. You don't want to stay there stunned for more than a second. Or otherwise you're going to get counter engaged and killed because you're wearing cloth, so that's dangerous. So having a personal cleanse on something like Spirit Hunter running cloth could be very important. For the boots, Graveguard boots helps especially for those that need to cast. So if you're not running Face Scale Hat with Damnation for some reason, then run Graveguard boots. At least it helps you stay immune to stuns, roots, and slows. Scholar Sandals is also very good, especially for mana regeneration. Carving is going to be heavy on mana. I think Permafrost definitely is heavy on mana as well. And Dawn Song will also be heavy on mana. So all three of those are going to require some form of mana regeneration, whether you use a Limhurst Cape or you use something else. I don't know, whatever you want to do. But yeah, Scholar Sandals would be an option for you. If you're running any of those, you're going to have a little bit of mana regeneration on those. But in generally speaking, you can run any sprint boots is going to be fine, because you usually want to be there fast, right? And I'll go into this in a second, because you want to be there fast. You want to be the first to hit at all times. All right. I'll go into that in a second when we go into the tips here. But the last one, you can also run Mercenary Shoes, because it helps you basically stay alive and get away from things. Spirit Hunter would be really good with this as well, because you go in, you hit your E, and then you can jump out. That way you can make sure you stay alive. Permafrost doesn't really need it, because Permafrost already has a blink on the W. It's not the same, but I mean, a blink and a W is good mobility. So things like that. For the tips, I've mentioned this a lot of times already. So you guys already kind of know it's coming. But essentially, if you're on time with your E, if you're on time, you're late. Okay? You cannot be on time. All right? If the caller says, engage the clump in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you end up hitting your E at 0, you're late. You're late. You got to hit your E at 1 all the time. You have to strive for that. You have to try to get that at all times, because your entire utility as a support DPS comes from the fact that you're gonna hit first before everybody else. Why? Because if you're a Pierce, you want to make sure that everybody that hits is gonna hit with a higher damage, right? So if you want everybody to hit with higher damage, that means that you need to hit your Pierce first. You cannot be second, you cannot be third, you got to be first, right? That's very, very important. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you're on time, you're actually late. So timing is extremely, extremely important. Another thing is you got to find angles. Like, I cannot say this enough. For all of these weapons, you have to find angles, especially Baden. And this is why people don't like Baden, is because it's really hard to find angles with Baden. But for all the weapons, it's very important that you find the angles. The one weapon that I would say you don't really need to find fucking angle is Damnation, because it's so fucking huge, right? It's so huge, it doesn't matter. Any angle is gonna hit anybody, you don't care. But every other weapon, you're gonna need to find a good angle to drop on the enemy. Usually what you want to look for is about a 45-degree angle from you to the clump in relation to the center of your Zerg. Okay, if that's confusing, then just think about it like the enemies in front of you. You want to be a little bit east or a little bit west of them. All right, if the enemy is north of you, you want to be a little bit east or west of them. All right, you don't want to be all the way to the far east or all the way to the far west. You want to be a little bit, you know, on the side, but you also don't want to be down the middle. Usually, that's usually. Finding the important angles is good, because you need to make sure you're on time, right? It all comes down to being on time. Remember, your job is to hit first. That is your number one job. So in order to make sure that you're able to hit first, you need to be able to have great positioning. All right, so find those angles. The next thing is, don't forget that you have a Q and W. All right, use the whole kit. Okay, your Q and W are very, very important, very useful. Stay active with them. Don't just think that, oh, well, my job is pierce, so I'm just gonna pierce and then move on with my life until the next E comes. All right, don't do that. Don't be complacent. Okay, your Q and W are strong. Every single one of these, we went through the Qs and Ws for a reason, except for carving. Carving is not very strong with Qs and W, but everything else is very strong with the Qs and Ws. And even carving, you still got to be active with the Q, because you got to keep stacking, right? So every single one of these, we went through the Qs and Ws because it's important to be able to use the Qs and Ws as much as possible during the fight to bring as much utility as possible, right? Things like the Dawn Song, the Firewall, it's incredibly useful. So use it as much as possible, right? Things like the Permafrost W, the Blink, right? It's gonna give you better mobility, so use that mobility to get in better positions. So they're all very, very important. Don't forget you have a Q and W. So the next one is living on the edge, right? So because you need to engage early, right? You need to engage first. That's, again, your primary goal. I keep drilling it because it's important, all right? So your primary goal is to hit first. Because your primary goal is to hit first, you're going to need to step closer to the enemy than the rest of your Zerg, okay? That means that you're constantly living on the edge, which means that you're constantly in danger of dying, which also goes back to what I was saying. Find angles, find good positioning where you can kind of stand to the side and not get hit by everything, but you're still in range to hit good targets. And we'll see some of that in the videos we're going to see in a minute here. Now, remember that you have a few defensives, okay? You don't have a lot of defensives. You're not a tank. Even if you're running a Hellion Jacket or whatever, you still have a limited amount of options for defensives. So because you have a limited amount of options for defensives, you need to make sure that you're not always staying at the front. I know I just said that. You're going to be living on the edge. You're going to be in the front. You're going to be in danger, right? But if your defensives are down, if you don't have a resist pot ready, if you don't have a gig pot ready, if your cleric robe is not up, things like that, then it's okay to take a step or two back, right? Be late for the next engage, and that's it. It's okay to be late for 1 or 2 engages so that you can make sure that when your cooldowns, your defenses are back up, you're able to step back up again and do your job appropriately again, right? Because if you end up dying, then suddenly the rest of your Zerg can't kill clumps, right? I can't tell you how many times I see Zergs doing really well and then they lose all of their Pierce players. And then suddenly they cannot kill a single person just because they lost their Pierce players, right? So that is very, very important for support DPS, is make sure that you guys are taking a step back if you don't have your defensives up. Now, the last tip here is focus on your job. And I keep hitting on this point, right? This is the point I keep hitting on over and over and over today, because it's the most important thing. You need to focus on your job. You're a support DPS. You're not a regular DPS. And this is exactly why I'm telling you guys, I separate all DPS, right, into different sections, because you need to be able to understand your role within the Zerg. Just because you're a DPS does not mean that your main job is to do damage. It's not. Support DPS's main job is to bring utility to the table while still bringing damage, right? But that damage is not going to be as high as a true DPS player. If you want to have high damage, go play a true DPS weapon. Support DPS weapons should be played as support DPS weapons, all right? So make sure that all your gear, right, to follow on focusing on your job, right? Make sure that all your gear that you're wearing actually helps in achieving the utility role, okay? Don't go and start running a bunch of shit like some Royal Hood just so that you can have a big clap on your E. Listen, Royal Hood or Royal Sandals, that's another one, right? Royal Hood and Royal Sandals are percentage-based modifiers, okay? So say the Royal Sandals, they give you 15% more damage, right? Well, what's 15% of 1,000 damage, right? So you're gonna have 150 more damage, okay? But if you're a permafrost, you're not dealing 1,000 damage. You're dealing like 600, 700 damage. And how much is that? 50% of that. You're talking about like, I don't know, what is it, like 90? Something like that, around 90, right? So you're only adding about 90 damage. Whereas somebody that's a true damage player will be adding about 150, maybe even 200 damage, okay? So Royal Sandals for you as a support player, a support DPS player, does not make sense. It doesn't. And this is what I say. I tell you guys all the time. These people are trying really hard to make these things work. Like the permafrost. I see permafrost players all the time. And I keep repeating permafrost because it's so notorious for this. Permafrost players all the time will go and sacrifice a cleric robe, the defensive of the cleric robe, for a scholar robe. And then they sacrifice the slow of the Q so that they can run the Ice Shard. And then they sacrifice a Fort Sterling Cape or a Limhurst Cape so they can run the I forget what it's called, Morgana Cape, I think it is. The one that gives you the faster cooldowns. I think it's Morgana Cape, right? And then they go and sacrifice all of these things just so they have more damage. And they go and add Royal Sandals and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna do even more damage with Royal Sandals. It's like, no, you're not. You're not going to do that much more damage, right? Because then now they're sacrificing other things like Scholar Sandals or a Sprint or a Mercenary Shoes, something that can help them survive, right? All because they're trying really, really, really fucking hard to make a Permafrost into a true DPS weapon when it's not, right? All these sacrifices are important, okay? Stop sacrificing to try to change your job, right? These weapons are support DPS. Your gear should follow this, okay? Your gear should follow this. So that's it with the first half of the stream of the episode today. So we're gonna be looking at some videos, and we're gonna review some of them here. We got videos on only a few of these. We have videos on Damnation, Spirit Hunter, Permafrost, and Dawnsong. All right, so we only have videos on 4 of them today, but I promise you they are good videos. So we'll take a look. Give me a second here. If you guys have any questions on anything we've talked about so far, or anything at all in general, just drop it in the chat right now. I am looking, but I am setting up for this right now. All right, so this first video, who was this? I don't remember what guild this is. I think they show it later. I don't know. I don't remember what it is, but this was about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now. Give me a second here. All right, no questions. Let's get started. So this is gonna be Damnation. All right.
4, 3.
All right, so first, I want to look at the kit. Oh my god, I can't look at the kit. All right, so first looking at the kit, he has the sickle, the firing sickle on the Q, right? The sickle that shoots forward and back. He has the pierce on the W. He has the obviously the E for damnation. He's got a scholar robe. I think that's a cleanse hood, right? And then he's running the refreshing sprint on the boots, right? Which is another one, by the way. Refreshing sprint is very strong, especially when you have to use scholar robe, because scholar robe is 40 seconds, so that way you can bring it down a little bit. He is running a pork omelet, and he's running a resist spot. So right now he's on the tower. He's defending against a Zerg. The Zerg he's defending against is Ava. Oh, it's One Punch Man. One Punch Man. This is like a really old video. This is against One Punch Man.
What, bro?
See how huge that shit is? Look at that. All of it. Like, he's not even in range. He just fucking hits everybody, though.
This again. Everybody.
Now he hits that W, and look at the damage that everybody's putting out. That's not his damage. Obviously, that's not his damage, right? But look at that damage, right? That's one fucking hit. All because he did a double pierce on that person. Right there. That's what I'm talking about. This is how strong the fucking damnation pierce is when you use both together. But it is hard because it has to be on time.
Every time he's out, defensively.
So this is a different perspective. Now, this video is gonna have a lot of different perspectives. Oh, it's Mud House. It's Mud House. Yeah, that's the guild. It's Mud House. All right, so this video is gonna have a lot of different perspectives. So he's gonna switch back and forth between some of the perspectives from his allies, some of his own perspectives, and some of the perspectives of the enemy. So this is one of his allies.
Don't let the boys stand. Nice. We good. Nice fucking.
Stop engaging.
Look at that. Look at that huge AoE, right? Look at that. That's the AoE right there. See, he hit the guys on the northwest, and he's also hitting the guys on the southeast. A Spirit Hunter can't do this. A Carving can't do this. Like, there's no replacement for Damnation when it comes to big AoE area like this. He gets that pierce. He actually missed, but that's because this wall makes it really hard to hit. But look at the damage he's able to do because of the pierces, right? And by the way, there is no Spirit Hunter down here. There's no Spirit Hunter. There's no Carving down here, right? And I know because I looked specifically at this video for it, right? And there's nothing. So this is literally just his pierce. It's nobody else's pierce because the nation E's don't stack. So that damage comes from the fact that these people are pierced.
Delete that shit from me, my boys. Delete this shit from me, my boys. Delete that fucking shit from me. Come back. Hold this. Come back.
Engaging on you now.
Come back. I know. Hold this. Disruption in the corner now. Come back.
So here he drops his W first, right? He's all the way up here already. He's already dropping his W.
Come back. Get to the east again, boys. Get to the east. Get to the east. Yo, east. Get to the east. We're gonna pull push this, okay? No, hold this. No, east. Get it again, boys. East. No, just hard engage. Everybody hard engage just in 5.
Look how he's finding angles. This is very, very important, right? He's over here. He's wandering around the northwest. He doesn't need to be on the ledge just in case the enemy bombs over wall. Although in this is the old castle map, right? There's a river down here in the southeast. He doesn't have to worry about it. But he's still back here, right? That's the discipline. He's back here in the northwest. He's disciplined. He's holding back. He doesn't need to be up here, so he's not. Now his caller, Weed Vice, is saying, oh yeah, we're gonna hit east here, right? So now he walks up here, and he hasn't popped this sprint or anything. He's in time. Look at the rest of his Zerg. The rest of his Zerg is hearing these calls, but they're not doing it. He's doing it, though. He's getting in position. This is exactly what you're supposed to do, because remember, you need to hit first. Always need to hit first.
4, 3.
Now he pops his sprint, runs up all the way up here. Look at that. He's the first one up here, right? Even the Camland hasn't hit yet.
2, 1.
He's already casting.
Bomb your touch.
And there's the E, right? That's as far as he could reach.
Bomb your taxi, come back.
And look, he's out before the silence or anything comes down on him. He's already out.
Bomb your taxi, come back. Bomb your taxi, defensive front. Because we got it, defensive front. Don't leave your boys up here. 4, 3. No, I need this.
All right, so here's another one, right? So let me go back actually. So here's another one.
We can engage.
See, it's coming back. They're talking. We can engage, right? They're letting them know. They're letting the caller know. He's already walking up here. He's already getting in the position. Look, he's not going down the stairs, down the middle. He's taking a different angle, right? Remember, I told you, angles, right? Angles are very important. He's taking a different angle, and he's going to hit from over here. He comes up, uses his W early, right? Whether or not he hits anybody with a W, it doesn't matter. He's going to hit it early, and then he's going to hit his E, right? The W is the cherry on top. Right, so if he can hit people with the W, great. If not, whatever. At least he tried. There he goes. He's channeling it. Look, the rest of his Zerg is still over there in the northeast, right? He's already hitting it. He's saying 1. Didn't I tell you guys? I told you guys. You have to hit it at 1, right? Right now, the caller's saying 1. And look, his fucking E just dropped. Right now, I think he should have placed it a little bit to the west here. He's not taking advantage of the big AoE range. He could have put it a little bit to the west, but it's okay. I mean, he still hit everybody he needs to hit because it's so fucking big, right? But the timing is what's important. Look, the rest of his Zerg is still coming in, right? Look, Siege Bowl's right here to the east. He's still barely coming in, right? The timing is what matters. And now he's going to drop his Q on them to do more damage.
Delete the Tyser. Bigger for the ace get. Come back fast. Strategy forward is we're gonna bomb over the. We're gonna bomb east. Okay, get the neighbors. East. Get the neighbors. Wait. Hold this. Get the east in front.
5. He's already casting at 5. Look at that. Again, a good angle, right, from the side, and the timing, right. This is what you guys need to accomplish with all of the support DPS weapons.
4, 3.
He's saying 1 right now, and it just hit, right? This is the point. This is what I'm trying to get you guys to understand. The timing is absolutely critical.
2.
Now he double pierced these guys. These guys are double pierced.
Hold this. Get the ace in front. 4, 3, 2, 1.
But you see how he shows us the other perspective? Why does he have to show us the other perspective? Because he didn't stick around to see what happened. He did his job and he got the fuck out. That's exactly what you guys all need to be doing. Do your job and get the hell out. Don't just stay there. I want to watch. I want to see what's happening. No. Watch the VOD later. Let someone else show you, a tank or something, show you what happened, right? You do your job, focus on your job and get out. Don't wait until the enemy counter engages on you.
Web the taxi.
They're full south of the courtyard.
Basta I want you to hold this, okay? Hold this. Hold this. You get your knees. This is 5.
5. He said 5. He's already channeling.
4, 3.
He's at 3 and he hits it. This is a little early, but it's okay. I don't mind early. I do not mind early. Look at this.
2, 1.
Like, listen, at the end of the day, what he's doing, what his caller's doing, it's not good. I don't like it. He's trying really hard to kind of push out here. It's bad calls. It really is bad calls. But I'm not concerned about the calls right now. I'm concerned about the way our Damnation player is playing based off of the calls, right? And even though they're bad calls or whatever, bad timing, all of that, and he's pushing his Zerg through a tiny ass choke, it's terrible. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that the Damnation is always on point. No matter what the caller says, no matter how good or how bad the call is, the Damnation there is on point, doing his job every single time, right? And it's not like, oh, well, he did his job here, he didn't do his job there. No. Every single fucking time he's early and hitting his shit and then getting the hell out. Look, longbows are channeling still, right? That's how fast this guy went in, dropped his fucking thing, and then come out, right? So when people go and say, oh yeah, Damnation's slow. Yeah, it is slow. It is slow, but you can make it faster by playing like how Lirasan is playing here, right? Lirasan's the guy we're looking at. So if you play like Lirasan here, and you can actually find angles and you can engage quickly, you can make the weapon faster, okay? So now, I'm not going to keep playing this. If you guys want to watch the video, the name is here. This is Shibo Sound Gaming. I'm going to find the other videos. The next video is going to be on a Spirit Hunter. So this is last home.
Ajuda healers, ajuda os gregos.
And that's Africa now calling. He's right here. And this is the last home.
Ajuda os gregos, anda pro W, ajuda os gregos. Ajuda os gregos. Dá um lock side agora. Lock, soco, ajuda pro sol, ajuda pro sol, ajuda pro sol, ajuda pro sol. Para, isso tudo vai estar no sul da parede.
Look at this. Look how beautiful this guy's playing. Tosco Profundo. Look how beautiful he's playing. He's by the ledge, right? By the west wall. Why is he by the west wall? Because it's very unlikely that the enemy's gonna engage the west wall because there's not a lot of people here. Now, if there was a lot of people here, it'd be very easy to engage the west wall. However, there's only him and one other guy there. So it's very unlikely for the enemy Zerg to hit this, right? They're usually gonna hit a little farther north over there.
Calma, ainda não. No sul da parede. Calma, no sul da parede. 6, 5, 4, 3.
Look, he saw some brimstones coming down and he backs up just enough. He just backs up just enough and then he keeps going back. He doesn't run away. He doesn't get scared. He just backs up at just enough as much as he needs to. And then he turns around and gets ready to do his job.
Voice.
He already dropped his E right here, right down here. So he already pierced very, very early because the caller right now is on 2, right? He's saying 2 right now. He's saying dois or dos or dois. I don't know. Portuguese says one of those two. But anyway, they say dos, right? So he's on 2. And he already dropped his E and he's already in the process of hitting his W.
No sul da parede, no sul da parede. No sul. Hit o sul, Sapuchai. Hit o sul, não precisa de só no sul mesmo. Tá, agora cai, vem no W. Sobe o choke, vem pra sabe.
Look at that. He's just auto attack. He don't give a damn, right? And he's gotta be completely safe. Look at, he's taking no damage. He's taking absolutely no damage here. And he's wearing a Helen jacket, by the way.
Sobe o choke pra sabe. Ajuda pro Santoné. Sobe o choke pra sabe, ajuda pro Santoné. Ajuda, se ajuda.
Look, the enemy just ran past him. They're engaging over there to the west. He's totally safe down here.
Se ajuda a subir o choke. Se ajuda a subir o choke. Espera. Paciência agora. Rola em cima desse choke.
DPS.
Escuta. Sobe em cima desse choke. Anda pra cima agora. Anda pra cima. Anda pra cima do choke. Eu tô vendo. Anda pro W agora. No IE. Bom choke. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nossa,
So here he was a little bit farther back, right? And he didn't have his boots. Look at his boots. They're 10 seconds out, right? This is why I tell you guys, don't run Royal Sandals. Because Royal Sandals, he didn't cancel the boots, so they actually had a 38-second cooldown. All right? Now, because of that, and because he's running beef stew, remember I tell you guys, do your fucking job. Don't try to go and add more damage, right? That's not your primary role. Your primary role is to do your job. Right here, he needs to drop his E, and he has to drop it from up here. He barely hit anybody down there. He barely reached them, right? He could have reached them if that cooldown was up. And that cooldown, that's 8 seconds of the Royal Sandals because it's 38 seconds versus 30. Plus, he could have ticked off about 3.5 seconds if he had a pork omelet. And that's a regular flat pork omelet, okay? So if you think about it, that's about what? 8 plus 3.5, that's 11.5, say 11 seconds. He could have shaved off 11 seconds. His cooldown's at 10 seconds. He 100% could have had his boots for this engage. But because he didn't have his boots, because he's of his choice in food, and because of his choice in boots, he's not able to get to the clump and do his job. This is what I'm telling you guys. Focus on your job. Stop trying to do everything. Stop trying to be a pure DPS when you're actually a piercer. And because of that, now he's also channeling his W over a fucking ledge. He's barely hitting anybody there. All right, so here they're getting flanked from the southeast. I had to spit it up because there was a lot of walking around. So right here to the southeast, he's going to engage. So he's already popping his boots. He's running straight southeast. He said 1, and he's channeling his E right here. He's literally dropping his E right now on this clump here. And instantly into the W, right? Now, imagine how much more damage he could be doing if he were to run Cleric Robe, right? With Cleric Robe as opposed to Hellion Jacket, that he's running Hellion Jacket, and then he's running these boots. He doesn't need to run these boots if he runs fucking Cleric Robe. He'll have more damage with Cleric Robe, right? So how much damage is this putting out? Not a lot, right? But it's a good amount. It's not negligent, right? It's not negligent. It's not negligible. There you go. It's not negligible.
mais pro sul, mais pro sul. E do sul, agora cai depois W. Deu alma, cai pro sul, caia pro sul. Anda pro sul, sim, sim. Anda pro sul, anda pro sul, anda pro sul, anda pro sul. Deu alma, sim, anda pro sul. Ajuda pra dar um jeito disso. Anda pro sul, anda pro sul, anda pro W. Tá no meio do sanduíche, anda pro W. Anda pro sul, depois pensamento, pensando no sanduíche. Anda pro sul, desce no lago pra cima. Desce no lago pra cima, Pedro pra cima. Desce, juro pro sul em W. Desce o lago.
Look at that. I tell you guys, firewall is so important, right? I tell you guys, firewall is so important, but people forget the utility of a simple fucking firewall. Look at this shit.
Desce, juro pro sul em W. Desce o lago. Anda pro W, desce o lago. Estabiliza.
Literally forces him to walk into the enemy and all the way around just so that he can get through that fucking firewall. Firewall is so incredibly strong, man. So incredibly strong.
Estabiliza embaixo do lago. A gente vai dar o nosso...
And it forced the healer to come back west to top him off, right? So now the healer is out of position and inside the enemy Zerg, right? Again, all of that is an outcome of a firewall. Because otherwise he would be standing all the way over there and the healer wouldn't have had to come west. All of this is because of a single firewall. The utility of firewall is extremely, extremely important. By the way, if your fucking healer drops a fallen E, walk into that shit. Don't be half HP or 40% HP and see a giant green circle and be like, nah, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Don't make your healer's lives harder.
Calma, nosso em W, em 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, dá ponto de choque, mas gigantesco, gigante, sério, que isso?
Now, even though he was late, he still dropped his Pierce in a good spot. Right now, he should have hit it down here to the west, because I think his Zerg wants to hit west. But either way, he saw another clump on the east, and that's fine. Right? He's still doing his job.
Agora, pessoal, cai pro prestado. Cola embaixo do sul, anda prestado. Cola embaixo do sul, anda prestado. Cola embaixo do sul, anda prestado.
Alright, I'm gonna put up another video here. The next one is gonna be a permafrost video. This is gonna be... The player name is Worst Generation.
Vale, usando el muro hacia el norte, vale, hacia el norte.
Alright, so this one's with M3R. M3R, the caller is Drake right here. So he's running the ice shard, right? He's running the ice shard that I told you about. He's running the frost, the frost blink thing. I don't know what it's called. It's the fucking blink. The regular E, obviously. The scholar robe. He's running assassin hood. He's running royal sandals. See how everything is like, I want to do more damage, right? At minimum, he's running pork omelet, so that's good. I'll give him props for that. But it's like he's trying to do so much damage. It's like, don't do this. Just focus on your job. It's much better.
Usando el muro en 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hacia el norte.
Look at that. All that stunned because of him. All of that stunned because of him. Now everybody else is going to be able to have a better chance at killing that because of his stun.
Hacia el norte. Bien. Salimos este. Ya. Vale, preparaos para hacer una contra en la front. En 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Full en front.
Another one. Look at that. All that stunned again, right?
Full en front. Vale, bien, buena ahí. Y nos ponemos en el west del hideout. Hacia el norte en 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Full norwest. Ahora full norwest en el choke.
He pops the stun here. And now his Zerg is going to be able to hit it again, right? It's the utility. And it's going to be over and over again. It's the utility that you bring to the table plus extra damage, not damage and then utility. Don't do that, because then you're screwing up with the rotations here. Now, this is a hand-picked like highlight reel, right? But I promise you, in between the highlight reels, I promise you this guy had a lot of engagements where he was late. I promise you he had a lot of points where he was, out of sync because his cooldowns weren't ready, right? Things like that, because his Q, wasn't great. So all these things matter, right? Making sure that he can do this, the stun, consistently and on time is the most important thing.
I'm killing them. Con pociones defensivos.
He uses the blink back to get out of it, right? The enemy was coming back at him, so he used the blink back and he's channeling his Q.
Chavales defensivos. Rotáis un poquito sur.
5, Team Norwest en 4, 3, 2, 1, Norwest. Enganche lo que puedan y looten.
Look at that. The clump was there and he stunned it. Keeps it there again.
Más para acá.
Por muy plazo, aquí looten. Luten, maten y luten, maten, luten, maten.
Camino este en 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Full esta hora, full esta hora, full esta hora, full esta hora, full esta hora. Ahí tienes un plan.
Look at that. Another one, right? And they can't move. That buys time. Look at it. His Zerg is late, but he's on time. His Zerg is late down here to the southwest, but he's on time. That's the goal.
Buena. Y ahora ya nos abrimos sur. Ok. Perfecto. Ok, hold. We are in your west. Vale, miráis sur.
Desmontado tu sureste.
Ok, listen, I'm gonna kill TTT, ok? Ya se stay alive, bro. Avancéis un poco conmigo. Listen, I'm gonna engage un TTT, ok, hacia el este, chicos. Avanzamos este en 5, 4, 3, 2, full noreste. I'm killing TTT, ok? Be careful. Just hold the north, ok? Let us kill TTT, ok? Pusamos sureste,
All right, so pretty simple, right? I mean, it's over and over, it's the same thing. That's because permafrost is always going to be the same thing. It's honestly a very simple weapon to get your job done. All right. The problem with permafrost is that people try too hard to make it into something it's not. All right. I'm not saying that you cannot make it into a decent DPS weapon. Yes, with Scholar Robe, with Royal Sandals. Yes, you can with a fucking Assassin Hood. Sure, you can make it into a decent DPS weapon. Here's the problem. Because you're running Scholar Robe, you're gonna lose the Cleric, right? You're gonna lose the defensive from the Cleric Robe. All right. Because you're running Royal Sandals, you're losing the timing of your boots, because your boots now are 38 seconds. And because you're running Assassin Hood, it's like, oh, well, it's okay. I have lower cooldown, whatever. That's fine. It's like, okay, but you're also losing a headpiece. You're no longer running a cleanse on your headpiece. You're not running a night helmet or something else that might help the Zerg, right? Instead, you're just running an Assassin Hood because you want to deal more damage. Again, your efforts are better spent on something else, some other weapon that is a true DPS weapon as opposed to a support DPS weapon like this one. The next one that we're going to watch is going to be a Donsong.
Okay. Just the front. East side. 3. East side in 2. East side. Yo, get the east. Just the front. Look at the front.
So he drops his E right away. See how he got knocked back? He was actually fast enough to cast it. Right? Even though he got knocked back. Let's see. He got the cast off. I'm 99% sure.
Okay. Just the front. East side. 3. East side in 2. East side. Yo, get the east. Just the front.
So there, he's dropping his E. And the guy's already about to bop him. Yeah, he got it off. Damn, that was close though. That was hella close. And this is why you gotta run like things like Night Helmet, right? Or at least Face Scale Hat, right? To stop it from doing that. It'll make sure that you're getting that E off. But he gets it off.
You use defensive in front. You go northwest.
Now look at that. He walks back and instantly is looking at somebody else to drop Qs and auto attacks.
Resi. Use in the front.
Now he's resetting with the assassin hood. He doesn't need to. You don't need to run assassin hood with this weapon. You really don't.
Okay, that's it. Okay, you walk into them southeast. Boys. You
Walk into them.
Okay?
Please.
Look towards the east side.
This is so free.
East side is 3.
They're fine.
See, all this time he's walking, he's not using his Q, right? All this entire time he's walking, he's not using his Q.
This is so free. They're fine.
This is so free.
Now remember, you gotta be first, right? Now, Donsong, you can be a little bit late. You don't have to be before the rest of your Zerg. You just have to be before the enemy heals, okay? So it gives you a little bit of wiggle room. But here he is late. He should be a lot faster than this. But either way, look, he found a good angle on the east side, and he's gonna get a good hit on this clump. So he's doing his job, and the Donsong has the benefit that he's playing off of the enemy heals, the enemy response to your engage, as opposed to just boosting your Zerg's engage.
What the fuck? Nice. Alright, where are they?
Look at that, instantly to the Qs.
Okay.
He puts a firewall down to make sure that he can back up. Look, he puts a firewall down, and now that enables him to walk backwards.
I got a locust.
And he uses it as a defensive measure. He's popping Qs non-stop.
Okay, so ready for defensive.
Look at his damage. Look at this guy's HP. We're gonna follow his HP for a second. Let's see.
I got a locust.
All All right, so he clicks one of the guys, and he's at 331 health.
Okay, if you're ready.
Look at every time he fucking ticks. Look at that. There's another one. There's another one. Right? This is killer, man. This is killer. Right? What the hell is a Demon Fang doing at this exact moment when they just use their E's and they're walking around? What is a Demon Fang doing? Moving around and repositioning? Okay, great. What is this fucking guy doing? Non-stop putting out fucking damage and finishing off kills. That's the difference. That's the difference with having useful Qs and Ws.
For defensive, we're ready for defensive. Yo, wait, he'll stop.
If it wasn't for the Oath Keepers, this guy would have been dead. He might still die actually because of the dot.
Keep going northwest, keep going northwest, keep going northwest, keep going northwest, boys.
They're bleeding inside of us though. It's kind
You
of
heal up,
slushy.
tanks hold east,
Yeah, they're coming in.
Oh, I'm inside of them. I'm so
Yo, west side engage. Oh nah, bro. Oh my god.
So here he should be popping his boots, running northwest because he's definitely out of position right now. He should be popping his boots running northwest.
Oh my god.
Fucking big boy.
So there's the E again.
Fucking delete.
And you see how huge, like he's literally a whole screen away from it, and he's still able to hit that clump. That I told you that the range of this weapon is fucking huge.
That was disgusting.
Yo, delete them. Yo,
And look, back to Qs. Look at this guy's damage. 970, right? 970 HP.
I'm just gonna drop my locust. There, in there. Nice.
Drop it. Keep walking to them north.
See how quick that motherfucker burned him down? And don't go telling me that the other fucking Bloodletter was auto attacking him, and you're gonna tell me that takes the fucking damage. Nah, let's look at this shit again.
Disgusting.
Delete them.
There it is, 1000 HP. He has a couple dots that are about to end.
Yo,
He does have a pierce. He has a damnation pierce on him. All right,
I'm just gonna drop my locust.
and he gets pierced again by the Bloodletter, by the Stalker Hood.
There, in there. Nice.
Drop it. Keep walking to them north. Keep walking.
Just melted, absolutely melted. Granted, he was pierced, right? Either way, you won't see that happen with something like a Demon Fang or any of the broader gloves. They won't do that with Qs and Ws. They won't.
Walking to them northwest right now.
Oh, I got bobbed.
Be ready.
I just keep spamming everybody. They messed their engage though.
They did. They're just tanks.
3, 2, 1. Yo, southeast, boys. Southeast.
There's the E. Look how big that shit is, right?
Nice.
Delete them here. Delete
And instantly goes back into Qs. He's queuing down this guy on the west.
them here.
Okay, this is their counter. This is
Yo,
their
be careful.
counter.
Defensive in the south. Defensive in the
Nice.
south. Defensive
Got my
in the
look.
Pops a sprint to chase him.
south.
This
Defensive
wall.
in the south.
Fog
Defensive
champ.
in the south. Defensive in the south. You heal up.
over here.
You heal up. You walk into them.
This
so
is
it's-
scrappy.
you walk-
All right, so this is my point, right, with the Dawn Song. This is my point with the Dawn Song. So that's the last video I got. I have one more, but it's also Dawn Song. I'll just put it. You guys can just watch it while we talk. But yeah, it's a second Dawn Song video. Let me see. All right, there. Any questions, comments, concerns? Drop them in the chat right now. That's the all the support DPS weapons. I know a lot of people keep trying to make these weapons into real DPS weapons. And listen, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm saying that if you were to do everything you're doing and sacrifice as much as you're sacrificing for a true DPS weapon, you will actually have an extremely much higher DPS output. If you were to do all those things for a true DPS weapon, right? So it's not worth it. Not for support DPS. It's not worth it. Focus on your job. All right, I'll give you guys a minute. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat right now. Otherwise, we're gonna close it up. We're actually on good time today. We've been most of our streams lately have been like basically 2 hours. One of them went over 2 hours. And I know I tell you guys I want to make it between an hour to 2 hours, and I usually want to keep it at about an hour and a half. So today's timing is perfect in my opinion. I know some people sometimes complain that they're a little too long, and sometimes people complain it's too short. So either way, you know, it depends on what you guys prefer, what you guys like. I prefer to just keep it between an hour and 2 hours. All right. So, like I said, get in the Discord. The Discord is gonna be if you're watching on YouTube, the Discord is in the description of the video. If you're watching on Twitch, the description is going to be below. You can just scroll down. There's gonna be a Discord link. You can hit that link. Get into Discord so you guys can get notifications. But also because in a couple days I'm gonna drop the new schedule for the next 2.5 months. I think it's almost 3 months of episodes. If you have any episode requests, drop them in the general chat in Discord. I will definitely look at that and see if I can kind of slide it in, because right now I am making the schedule. So if you have a good idea for an episode, I might be able to squeeze it into the episode somewhere in between. Depends on what kind of episode it is. So, all right, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys on Friday. Have a good one.
Causing these problems. It smells so bright with eyes like these diamonds.